Hello there, Grateful Gang. Welcome to Gratefully Living the Chronic Life. I am Lauren Blanchard-Zaleski, and if it's your first time watching, welcome. I come to you every week on Thursday. This is a special time we are at today because our guest is from the UK, and in the UK, it's very late at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern time, which is when I normally air. So thank you if you're watching live. Thank you for being with us at this special time, but it is worth it because I have Dr. Fuschia Sirois with us today, who was with us back in September. She is out of the University of Sheffield. She's a gratitude researcher, but all sorts of other things too. Tonight we're talking about procrastination and perfectionism. She has a new Audible and research out, which is absolutely fascinating. So I can't wait for you guys to hear what she has to share with us. So anyway, she was back here in September with us talking about gratitude, and it went really well. And after the broadcast, I said, I'd love to have you back. She said, I would love to. And rather than be off in the future, I'm like, okay, when? And we penned it on the calendar for today. I wanted to have her on. This is our last broadcast of National Gratitude Month, rounding out National Gratitude Month here, because next Thursday, I will not be here because it is U.S. Thanksgiving. So I am taking the day off to be with my family. But I just completed a podcast with Julie Boyer of the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast, which I believe is coming out on Thanksgiving Day. So we will air that instead. So next week I'm off, and after that we've got some great guests coming up, and we're looking to December already, believe it or not. So we have Gabby Siegel is coming on December 2nd. She is going to talk to us about the healing powers of music. If you guys remember, I had an art therapist, Lacey Mucklow, on maybe back in August. We've become quite friendly. She was awesome, talking about art and creativity, living with our struggles and overall health. And I told her I want to do an episode on music, and she's like, boom, she produced Gabby Siegel, who is absolutely awesome. You guys are going to love her. So she'll be here December 2nd, December 9th. Mary Beth Sammons, who is the co-author of this wonderful little book, Living Life as a Thank You. These wonderful essays on people living with gratitude, with all sorts of struggles. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. So she's going to be with us on December 9th. December 16th, I have Dr. Kathy Zhang of the Purpose Filter podcast on. She's a palliative care physician, and she's got this wonderful podcast talking about living life, living life out loud while you're still alive. She's got a beautiful message. And then I just booked this one yesterday, and I'm excited. January 6th, we're into January already. Toni Bernhard, who is one of my favorite authors, and a very big reason why I send the message that I do with chronic pain and illness. She's authored many books, How to Live Well with Chronic Pain and Illness, How to Be Sick, and a few others. I've had her on the show a few times. I spoke with her yesterday. She's going to come back on January 6th. So thank you, Toni. And January 13th, I have another UK guest. It's going to be another special time. Gurma Bishaw. I don't know, Fuschia, if you know him. But he is part of something in the UK called the Gratitude Initiative. So he's going to come on with us January 13th. The next 2 months are boom, we've got all sorts of great guests coming on. So I'm super excited. Before we get to Fuschia, I want to bring her on because it's going to be one of those hours that goes fast. There's so much information to cover. So I'm shamelessly plugging my little gem here. This comes out November 30th, 5-Minute Gratitude Journal for Teen Boys. I checked this morning. I'm going to kind of cry when I say this, but it's number 5 on the young adult new releases, and it's not even released yet. I am so proud of this project. Completely unexpected that I wrote this book, but I was asked to write it, and I'm so, so proud of it. It is way more than just what are you grateful for at the top and blank lines. It's 120 days of topics that are specific to lives of teens. I mean, really any teens, but teen boys is what this one's geared towards, but really teen girls would benefit also. If you'd like to pre-order a copy, there's a link in the broadcast information. And my publisher told me yesterday that if anybody wants to review a free copy in exchange for a review, they've got a few extra copies they can donate. So you can private message me and we can do that. Many of you have actually already volunteered to do that. So thank you very much. What else? I think that's it. So next week's Thanksgiving. Oh, I'm wearing my Thanksgiving shirt today. Brand new Thanksgiving shirt. Thankful, grateful, blessed from Life is Good shirt I got on sale like back in February or something. So happy Thanksgiving early to you guys. So I'm going to bring on Fuschia because I just adore her and I'm so grateful that she's back with us. Hey, Fuschia.
Hey, how you doing?
Dr. Sirois should be.
It's okay. Fine.
So she's coming to us all the way from the UK, which is why we're at a special time today. And you're with us back in September talking about gratitude. And your research is mainly, you talk about gratitude and self-compassion as positives, but you also do a lot of your work is heavy on procrastination and perfectionism, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like two sides. Well, they're not the same coin, but the coins of what I call risk and resilience. So last time I was here, we talked, gratitude and self-compassion as sort of resilience factors that help people, manage struggles and difficulties. But I'm also interested in those factors that can make things more difficult for people, such as procrastination, especially chronic procrastination, and perfectionism as well. So yeah, I've actually been researching procrastination for over 20 years, which seems like a really long time, but I still don't have all the answers, but have some.
It's a fascinating field, and I don't know how big your research field is, but when you Google procrastination and research, your name comes up all over the place. She has an Audible out on Amazon called Do It Now, Overcoming Procrastination, which I have listened to, and it's wonderful. And the information is fascinating, which she's going to share with us today. And it actually came at a very interesting time for me because I'm in the process. Actually, today is my final deadline to submit book number 2, which is a 52-week attention journal. So much of the stuff you've been talking about has been applicable to me. So what is procrastination, first of all?
Yeah. So that's always the best place to start because it gets confused a lot with just regular garden variety delays. When we're talking about procrastination, there's a couple of key things. So it is a form of delay, but it's a particular form of delay. So it's delaying an intended task, an intended and important task. So it's something you said, I'm going to do this, right? But it's unnecessary and voluntary delay. So you're not putting something aside or delaying it because your priorities have shifted and now you have something more important that you need to take care of that's urgent. And you're not, putting it off because an emergency came up and you have to, put it off because this other,
right.
somebody told you stop working on that and work on this instead, right? Which would be involuntary delay. So it's something you decide I'm going to delay on and it's unnecessary and it's something you said you would do. And you do this despite knowing on some level that you're going to be worse off for doing so, that there's going to be some sort of harm for you or for others. And that's how we define procrastination. It has to kind of tick all those boxes before it's real procrastination and not just some other type of delay, because we can make wise decisions to delay. Especially in the context of living with a chronic condition, sometimes you have to kind of go, you know what? I don't need to do this today. I need to step back. It's wise for me. It's wise for my own well-being to step back from this and not push myself to try and get it done today. And it can wait till tomorrow. There won't be any negative consequences if I do it tomorrow instead of today. So that's sagacious or wise delay. That's not procrastination.
That's self-care, right? Saying, I've had it, I'm done for today. I'll pick up where, tomorrow. Or like you said, things happen in life and sometimes you have to delay. But procrastination is really making a conscious decision, knowing what the results are probably going to be, and doing that. So why do we do it? I know that's a loaded question after 20 years of research.
Well, I mean, then we do have some closer answers to that. I mean, there's a lot different researchers and different psychologists have different perspectives, but um, our perspective, which has been getting a lot of traction lately, both in the research, arena and also in the media too, is that it's really about poor mood management. So a lot of people think, you're procrastinating, you're not managing your time well, right?
Right.
So we say
Or you're
it's not,
lazy.
yeah, or you're lazy. Oh,
Right.
yeah, that's a big one, right? Or you lack self-control or willpower or something like this, And it's not that. It is actually about poor mood management because we say, when you're procrastinating, you've got this task where people procrastinate on tasks that are unpleasant, right?
Right.
Or that are aversive to them. And it could be, just an unpleasant task like cleaning the toilet, right? Like, which is nobody really loves to do. Or it could just be a task like writing a report, writing a book or something like that, right? That something about that task brings up negative feelings or stress or worry or concern or anxiety or frustration or, self-doubt or negative self-evaluations, these sorts of, negative feelings, right?
Right.
And so something about the task is aversive and makes you feel negative. And so a lot of us can know how to deal with those negative emotions. Maybe we were brought up to learn these emotion regulation strategies, which is what we mean by that is the ability to dial down negative feelings when they get too much for us and dial up positive feelings to sort of compensate. And that's what we mean by emotion regulation. Well, most of that's done inside. But if you're somebody who's prone to procrastination, or maybe just whatever it is you're dealing with, it's just, such a high level of emotion that these strategies don't normally work. You use procrastination as a way to cope with the mood. So you basically take that task as causing you a lot of stress and frustration. It's really aversive and really bothering you. You put it aside, you forget about it. All of a sudden you feel relief. You feel better, right?
Briefly.
You just, well, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. But momentarily you've
Right.
just regulated your mood, but you've
That's
done
true.
it outside of yourself. You've not done it drawing on your own inner psychological resources, right?
Right.
And then the thing that happens from that, and so you said, briefly, yes. So it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. It's not considered really healthy emotion regulation because it doesn't last. Because what replaces that relief initially, even if you're distracting yourself by, binge watching shows or, doing something more pleasurable, is feelings of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And then you start feeling bad about your procrastinating. And this is really well documented in the scientific literature. Yeah, it's called procrastinatory cognition. This is a really weird name for it. It's the thoughts that people have after they procrastinate. And these have been shown to make them feel worse. And
you can't even really enjoy it, right?
No, and it makes them procrastinate more.
Yeah,
you see, that. So it gets a vicious cycle. So now they're procrastinating more on top of the initial procrastination. And so, yeah. So what we say, it's all about poor mood management. Emotions are at the core of procrastination. It's not a rational choice. It's absolutely quite irrational. So it makes sense that something as irrational as our emotions are sort of underlying it.
Interesting. So, in listening to your lecture, which is again absolutely fascinating, I was trying to apply it to me, and I wouldn't say I procrastinate the book, but part of me wants to. Like I could write in Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, which is my Facebook group. I can write thousands and thousands of words and be completely fine. Something about having to answer to a publisher is making me like, maybe it's fear of them not liking the work, which I in the back of my mind, I know that's not going to be the case. Yeah. Answering to somebody, because I don't have to deal with that with the group. Everybody's like, oh, this is great or whatever, Yeah. So it's interesting trying to figure out where I fall in this whole spectrum.
Yeah, and it doesn't, it can be the slightest, instead of aversiveness, it doesn't have to be gut wrenching, kind of, you're just tight, really stressed out of your mind to make you procrastinate. It can be little things that make you feel uncomfortable. And so you're being evaluated. That will certainly do it, right? I mean, we just, we're social creatures. So we're very sensitive to evaluation and when we're being evaluated. And like you said, when you're in the group and that it's more spontaneous, it's free flowing. This is more formal now.
Yeah.
Right. It's more formal and it is going to be evaluated and you will get direct feedback about it. So it's not just evaluation. It's that part of that evaluation is that you get feedback. whereas you wouldn't
Right.
get that same type of feedback in, in a more free flowing forum. And that alone can be enough to just make you a little bit nervous about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you talked in the lecture about getting job or performance reviews, right, at your job. And you actually mentioned graduate students. You studied graduate students as well. And obviously these are very highly intelligent people. So it has nothing to do with intelligence whatsoever.
No.
They, to get into graduate school, they had to be highly intelligent, obviously, but they'll put off writing a report.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because it's the final thing that that they're going to be evaluated by. So sometimes it's the finiteness of it too. Like once it's down and it's on words and it's handed in, that's it. You can't change it. You can't, well, you can change it. There's edits and things that can be done, but
Right.
there's something very final about that as well. So that can be. Some people enjoy that, but other people might think, that you want something a little bit more fluid.
There's something I wrote down that you mentioned. Your irrational voice. Where did I put it? Your irrational voice, which is your emotions. Forget. Wrote it somewhere. I thought you said there's an irrational voice telling you these things, and your irrational voice is your emotions. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it is. If you guys have a question or a comment for Dr. Sirois, please feel free. Let's see, Robin Davis is here. Procrastination is delaying an important task voluntarily and unnecessarily, despite the knowledge that it will cause harm. She's got it right on the money there.
Yeah, that's right.
For mood management, something about the task is adverb. Does she work for you? Lots of people have, after they procrastinate, build upon themselves. Yeah. Hi, Heidi. Thank you guys for being here at this special time. Hello from Chile. Hello, welcome. So on the other side, so you do a lot with procrastination and perfectionism, which upon first glance, it would almost seem like they're two different sides of the spectrum, but they're really not, are they?
No, not quite. Perfectionism is another one of those things that, we all have sort of, firsthand knowledge of, or we hear a lot about perfectionism. Some of us hear it as, oh, it's a good thing. We're always trying to get perfect. Like, it's part of our regular vocabulary. It's like, oh, perfect. You did that really well. Like as if it's just like it's an okay thing, right? Well, in the research literature, we actually look at perfectionism in a little bit more of a nuanced way. So we say it's multidimensional. So there's different components. There's two key components of perfectionism. And one of them is kind of like what, we think of as being, I don't want to use the word good perfectionism because I know the researchers in this area and they would just be scowling at me right now if I use that word. But let's say less
not
harmful.
As harmful.
Not as harmful.
Yeah.
Perfectionism, which is about setting your own standards and striving to reach those, although sometimes they can be a bit high and you can be a bit hard on yourself when you don't reach them, but you're doing it for yourself. And so sometimes people confuse that with striving for excellence. Striving for excellence is not the same as striving for perfectionism, because excellence is kind of doing your best. Perfectionism is holding yourself up to some standard that you think is out there that you haven't reached yet.
Which will never be good enough because there is no perfect.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the less harmful perfectionism. And the more harmful, which everyone agrees is harmful perfectionism, is something we refer to as self-critical perfectionism or perfectionistic concerns. And it's particularly harmful because the standards that this type of perfectionist strives for are not their own. They're the standards that they think that everyone else wants of them.
Yep.
So they're the standards that they think society wants of them. So society says, if I'm going to be a good mother, a good partner, I should do these things.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if I'm going to be a good friend, I should do these things. Right. And so they internalize a lot of these standards, but they internalize them in an idealized way again, to the point where it's just impossible to reach. But attached to those standards is their self-worth. So we call this kind of a contingent self-worth. So it's basically, if I don't reach the standard that I think my boss, my family, society wants me to meet, right? It means that people won't love me, people won't accept me.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough, as and I'm defective. So again, their sense of self and their sense of self-worth is tied to reaching these impossible standards that they imagine other people want it from them. And you can see how that can become quite destructive very quickly.
I've got to imagine that places like Instagram or social media just feed right into that. I mean, I worry, my kids are, in their 20s now, but I worry about teens of today with Instagram, and they're, you just hear so much of mental, emotional illness from these poor kids because they're used to Instagram perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's nice to see a little bit of work being done with trying to show authenticity being as a good thing.
Yeah,
But it's a
exactly.
little, social media can be scary because we get everybody's highlight reel, right? We get everybody's
Yeah.
the best vacation pictures, the best family photo. Like everybody's got this perfect life on paper, but we're not seeing the other stuff behind the scenes, and that's what we think is real.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that really fuels that's these perfectionists to never be happy or satisfied enough with what they do. And so we have got these two types, and we did some research a couple of years ago where we looked at all the research that had been conducted on people that have a tendency to procrastinate and these two types of perfectionism. And what we found was really interesting. So sort of what you said at the beginning, it would seem like they would go off in different directions. Well, that was actually the case for the less harmful perfectionism, where the person sets their own standards. It was actually negatively related to procrastination. So those types of perfectionists were less likely to procrastinate. But as you can imagine, the perfectionists who are, trying to live up to possible standards that they think society and the people in their lives want of them, and are constantly self-critical of themselves, that was positively linked to a tendency to procrastinate. And you can imagine it too. Like you're starting off, you're going to do something, you start working on the task, and it doesn't go smoothly, right? And so you got, it's not going to be perfect. So they give up and abandon, right? Or they go, I'm not going to have enough time to get it just the way I want to get it. So why bother trying?
Right. Would you say that that's the type that, a lot of people obviously struggle with being on diets, weight issues and stuff. And, they do a little screw up one day and then they're like, well, just forget it. Is that, would you attribute that type of the same thing?
Yeah. It's very much that kind of, it's like an all or nothing thinking, they call it in the clinical literature, or it's a zero tolerance policy. So that type of perfectionist has a zero tolerance for any signs of failure or lapses or anything. They expect that when they do something, every step of the way has to be perfect. There's no mistakes, no lapses, and any sign that isn't going that way to them means they've failed right then, even though they haven't, they're only maybe just starting, or they're only halfway through whatever it is they're working on, whether it's a diet or an exercise, routine or what have you.
So are those bad perfectionists, the
unhealthy perfectionists,
the unhealthy perfectionists, do they underperform because of this?
Not usually. They procrastinate. They certainly do procrastinate. They essentially they're more sensitive to failure feedback, so they're more likely to stop and abandon tasks and give up and not persist, right? Whereas the not as unhealthy perfectionists will persist. If things aren't going well, they will keep going because they're driven from their own internal desire to do this more so. Whereas when you're doing it because you're thinking it's about it, everything, people liking you and being successful and everything is contingent on how perfectly you do something, then you're more likely to kind of just give up along the way. So
yeah. Are they ever satisfied, even if they reach an ideal that they're never satisfied?
No, and that's actually how that's defined. So that's part of the definition of that type of perfectionism, is that even when those standards are reached, they're not satisfied with them. They don't have the ability to stop and savor what they've done. It's never quite good enough. They'll downplay their successes and say, well, so help me. So it really wasn't my effort. And that type of thing.
I talk about that a lot with gratitude and mindfulness. We don't stop to enjoy like the now. We can look back from where we've come, and I can enjoy this moment. I'm sitting here talking to Dr. Fuschia Sirois from the UK for the second time. My life is so blessed, and because of all these awful things that happened to me in my life prior. I've got this blessed life, and I'm not looking into into the future, but I'm giving a bad analogy here. So if we're not appreciative of what we have now, we're always looking to accumulate more and more and more, right? When will we ever be satisfied?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and the gratitude has, it goes as well also for, when you do reach a goal. So it's not just gratitude to other people, but yeah, like you said, grateful for having opportunities to, get part of what you're striving towards done, at least even.
Right.
And there hasn't been a lot of research on gratitude and perfectionism. We've done a couple of more informal analyses, and not surprisingly, that unhealthy perfectionism is negatively related to gratitude. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else, right? So it's just as you're saying, that if you're just focused always on what it is that you haven't got, or where you haven't gotten to that you think you need to get to,
That makes sense.
It's hard for you to focus on and attend to the positives and appreciate them.
Right. Interesting. With procrastination, oh no, I just lost my train of thought. Something about procrastination. Oh, I know what it was. Some people claim that they work better under pressure, so they'll procrastinate. Is that a myth?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So put it to you this way: that one is what we call a post hoc rationalization, right? So we come up with that one after the fact to rationalize the procrastination.
Okay.
Yeah, because think about it this way: if that was the case for all those people that say, "Oh, I do my best work under pressure," and it's so when if I procrastinate and I'm doing it at the last minute, it's okay because it's going to be a really good performance because that's when I do my best work. Well, I would challenge those people and say, "Great, okay, so if this really is the case, then you should never start something early. You should always, in anything you do, wait until the last minute to do it, because after all, that's going to give you your best performance, right?" But nobody sets out to do that. No one goes, "Oh, I got 2 weeks, but you know what? I'm going to wait till 2 days before because that's when I do my best work."
Right.
So it's not a purposeful plan to get your best performance. It's a post hoc rationalization.
They're rationalizing at the end of it. That's okay. I work better under pressure anyway. When the kid tells you the night before, "Oh, I've got a report due tomorrow, by the way," you just want to wring their neck. Let's take some comments here. Robin, it's so nice to see you here today. Thoughts that people, oh, we got that one already. Arlene's here from Canada. Hello, Arlene. Perfectionism is multidimensional. One is useful, striving for perfect. One is more harmful, a personal perfection. I swear she works for you. More idealized.
She's taking good notes.
She is. Authenticity is better overall. The best work under pressure thing is often a trauma response. Robin must work in this field, I'm guessing, because she sure knows a whole lot about it. That's awesome, Robin. Thank you. If you'd like to ask Dr. Sirois a question or add your comment, please feel free. So how do perfectionism and procrastination work? Do they work together often? Do they go together?
Well, they can exacerbate each other, right? So if you're perfectionism, that unhealthy perfectionism, it can drive you to procrastinate. It can get in there, and if you're already prone to procrastination, you could use the perfectionism as even another form of rationale for why you're not working on it now. Oh, it's not the perfect conditions, right? Or I'm not I'm not in the best energy level right now, right? And I'm not going to be the best writer today, right? Future me is going to be the perfect writer. Future me will have all the best ideas, right? So we can kind of think about future versions of ourselves as being more perfect than what we are right now, and because we want things to be perfect, which isn't, it's an illusion. We might put off for those reasons. So certainly the perfectionism can feed in to procrastination. But the other is true too. People who are these more unhealthy perfectionists are going to be more prone to procrastination, just simply because it's easier to imagine that piece of perfect work that you never finish or accomplish as being perfect, and than it is to actually start on it and see that there's a lot of work to be done and things will never be that perfect. It's almost, you know what I'm saying? It's a kind of phenomenon that happens when we can imagine, oh yeah, if I could do this, it'll all be this way. And we get it all built up at what the task is going to look like. And the minute we take a step to actually do something, we're faced with all the difficulties, the hard work, the fact that we're going to have writer's block, if say it's a writing piece or some other difficulty. And now all of a sudden that kind of shatters that illusion of how perfect the result could be.
Mhm.
It brings it down to the real world, right? And some people have a hard time with that. It's actually better sometimes to dream about what it could be than actually, get down and put in, the actual, nose to the grindstone and just do something that's real.
Right.
It may not be perfect, but it's real and it's done. And this is, I think, often the tension that happens, especially if someone has a lot of those perfectionistic tendencies, is you get caught in that sort of dream of what it would be like, but it always just stays out there and never really happens, because as soon as you try to do it, you can see right away it's not going to be as perfect as you imagine.
Right. I hear a lot from people, things like, well, I'll do it in a few months when my life calms down.
Oh yeah, like the perfect time. Yeah, when it's the perfect time. Yeah,
I've never heard one person ever say, my life's pretty calm right now. Never. There's always something,
Yeah, I've got another a self-help book that's it's just gone into production now. It'll be out in June next year as part of the APA life tools. Some procrastination, I'm doing it. But unlike the audiobook, it's different than the audiobook because there's a lot of tools and stuff in each chapter. But I have the final chapter. I have a section, just what you're talking about the perfect time, right? So what is this perfect time? If we're putting off doing something because we want it to be the perfect time, that's an illusion for a number of different reasons. And one of them is like, who are you to judge what that perfect time is?
Yeah.
How do you not know that right now isn't the perfect time where everything comes together once you get started? Right. So instead of sort of imagining some perfect time, that apart from it being an illusion, that's suggesting that that how things are going to turn out, right? And how it's going to be once you get going, right? It's like you've got some kind of psychic abilities and clairvoyance, and you can see, oh, this is the perfect time and everything will fall into place. None of us have that ability, but what sometimes we do know is that the perfect time is what's perfect for us, right? So and that's not necessarily when things are calm. Sometimes it's not about performing well under pressure, but sometimes we need to be in the middle of some struggles to be able to draw upon the wisdom from those experiences and bring those to bear on whatever it is, that task that we're doing. And we might have a different quality of performance on whatever task that we're considering putting off, because we are dealing with other things that we're struggling, and we can bring the coping mechanisms and the insights that we have from those other hectic or less calm things that are going on in our life, and maybe that's what's going to make it perfect. Again, not using that word as if it's real, but I mean, perfect for you, right?
So interesting. What a great point. Almost like going through the struggle and using it as fuel, because your emotions are built up inside of you. It's very real and raw, and that'll drive you to do whatever it is that you set out to do, and maybe make you more focused on it. That's excellent point. Interesting. I'm hearing this is so me from Tammy. I still remember Pilgrim's Progress 20 years ago with my procrastinating son. Not sure what that is, but that sounds like it was a traumatic experience for you, Seaton. Tusif says, realization between pain and procrastination. How do people in pain not procrastinate? How do you break the cycle? I was going to get to that. So that's a really good segue. You talk, a lot of your research is with people with chronic illness, gratitude and self-compassion and procrastination and perfectionism. So how does it all relate?
So we have done some, we've done less research in terms of procrastination and chronic health conditions, more with perfectionism. I have this one paper. I swear I'm not procrastinating on getting it out there, but it's just, I've been trying to figure out ways to sort of package it up, I think, with some other, some data that we have. I think, first of all, delaying things because you're in pain is not procrastinating. I think that's really, really important to look at that, because that's not voluntary. You didn't decide, hey, I'm going to be in pain right now, so I can put this off. Nobody decides that,
No,
right? That's not, voluntary,
it's
right?
self-compassion, right? It's
Yeah. So
self-care. We need
that's
it.
not a voluntary delay when you delay because of pain. You delay
Right.
because of pain. You don't procrastinate because of pain, right? But we did do some research a little while back, and we wanted to look at people who were prone to procrastination, so kind of chronic procrastinators. And we wanted to look at um, basically how are they coping. So if you're someone who's already prone to regulating your emotions by putting things off, and now you're living with a chronic health condition, right? So it's, again, it's not the pain driving procrastination. Was just, maybe this was your MO before you had your condition. So we looked at in people with who were coping with fibromyalgia, and we wanted to see if people who were chronic procrastinators, how well were they coping? You can imagine that probably not so well,
Yeah.
and compared to people who are not procrastinators. So this is because we do it on a scale. So when we look at this measurement, we're saying if someone is scoring really high on procrastination, how does that relate to coping? And the opposite of that is true as well. And so we asked them, questions. So I'm coping well with the emotional aspects of my fibro, for example. I'm coping well with the day. I'm coping with the daily problems of my fibro, and I'm coping with the symptoms of my fibro, for example. And we asked them also about their relationship satisfaction with their fibro. And people who had higher scores on this tendency to procrastinate were coping worse on all those dimensions.
Not surprising.
Yeah, not surprising, because you're already avoiding things and not dealing with things. So and that's another way to think about procrastination, is an avoidant way of coping. Something's unpleasant, and rather than try and find a way to solve it, or to kind of muster up the what you need inside to manage those emotions, those negative emotions, and tolerate them and accept them, right? And that's where we say self-compassion could be really beneficial too for procrastination. They just get into further avoidance, and so
and then it exacerbates the stress, right? And then stress exacerbates pain. So it's a vicious
exactly.
cycle.
Yeah. So it can really play into that. And we see similar types of things. We've done more research with perfectionism. We've done studies looking at perfectionism in people with fibromyalgia and with CFS, and other conditions as well. And you see very similar type of pattern where there's a greater use of these less adaptive, or what we call maladaptive, coping strategies that lead to greater stress. And this is the problem. And I think my interest with these risk factors is they're risk factors, especially in the context of a chronic health condition, because they increase your stress. And we know what stress can do to symptoms, and in certain conditions it can actually progress the disease. Like it's just really not helpful at all. So it definitely these are two sort of tendencies that are not really healthy to have anytime, but let alone in the context of when you're dealing with a chronic health condition.
Have you done any studies as far as like a percentage of those who are perfectionists or procrastinators, how many of them live with chronic illness? Is it a high percentage?
There hasn't been any research looking at that. And one of the things is that we don't really classify people. So, because it's always on a scale from, you either have a high score or you have a low score kind of thing. So, and there's not like cutoff points like there are in some clinical instruments where if you reach a cutoff point, you're classified as this. So it's more about sort of the ultimate levels. So that's a good question. We have seen that in the context of a number of chronic health conditions, things like perfectionism. There was one study that was done a few years ago that found that unhealthy perfectionism actually predicted mortality in older adults with diabetes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really quite shocking. And I did one study. It was more of a cross-sectional study where I was looking at heart health and procrastination. So we had a sample of about 1,000 people. And there was about 180 or so in that sample that self-reported having high blood pressure, so hypertension, or cardiovascular disease. And then so we went back and we grabbed a another 500 or so people out of this overall sample of people who had no health problems at all. Clean bill of health, no chronic health issues of any kind. So we wanted them as a comparison group. And so I compared those two groups on their scores on this measure of this chronic tendency to procrastinate. And as you can imagine, those with the poor heart health had higher scores. Now, okay, so that would make some sense. Of higher stress and you don't look after your health, because chronic procrastinators don't engage in the types of health promoting behaviors they have to either, because they're not fun. They can be aversive and pleasant, to start getting into a jog and giving up sugar and things like that, right? Yeah. But so because there's a lot of things that can predict heart health, I went further, and then so I controlled for things like age and gender, and socioeconomic status, because that's a huge predictor of heart health as well, and other personality factors that are well known to predict, whether somebody has a lower or higher hypertension, for example. And so I put all that in the model. I thought, okay, that's going to wipe out anything I just saw with procrastination. It's going to be these other personality factors or these other factors that we know predict them, and maybe this was just sort of a random result. No, it actually, procrastination, like as a chronic tendency, it was the only personality predictor above and beyond the other two that are well known in the literature to predict poor heart health. It was the only personality predictor factor to predict what we call group membership. So predicted who was going to be have the poor heart health and who was going to be healthy. And when we translate the numbers, it worked out to, for every 1 point increase of your score on this measure of chronic procrastination, your risk of being in the poor heart health group went up by 63%.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So because that's years, maybe decades of chronic stress from procrastinating, putting off looking after your health, and also maybe even engaging in unhealthy habits too.
Yep.
Right. And those are all predictors of poor heart health, but that is the commonality there is a tendency to just generally procrastinate on things that you find unpleasant. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the health, because that was a question I had too. Many of us will put off we know we need to see a particular specialist, and we put it off. Is it because we don't want to know the answer? We're tired of seeing that. Yeah, that's what it is, huh?
Yeah. People, I mean, because it's unpleasant, right? So, and the people put that off. I actually did one study with nurses, and it was quite fascinating, because nurses are highly stressed group, and they've got a lot of demands on their time and everything, and they also know how important it is to look after their health, and gave them again a measure of sort of a chronic tendency to procrastinate, and asked them to rate their health and their stress levels, and also whether they saw themselves as healthier than most doctors or most nurses or other people, etc. And again, what we found is that the nurses who scored very high on this tendency to procrastinate, they rated their health lower than other people. They were more stressed as well. And interestingly enough, too, they were less likely to reach out for help, and to get social support. Because there's a shame element attached to being a procrastinator, right? Yeah. Especially if you're a nurse, right? You procrastinate looking after your health, and you're a nurse, you should know better. Right. So you're not going to tell anybody that. You're going to keep your procrastination to yourself.
Yep. Interesting. Not really surprising, but interesting for sure. There's a comment here I wanted to share from Janet Atkinson. I've seen this in my child from a young age. She's now in high school and wants to get a PhD when she's older. What advice would you have for her? Her physical health is being compromised.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. And this goes back to, where does procrastination come from? And there's different perspectives. Some say,
because in your lecture, you say it's, although it can be important, there are strategies that we can do to help.
There are. Yeah, there are. And I think, and especially if you see it in a child, I mean, so first of all, and I don't want to scare anybody by this, there's been some, genetics research on procrastination that actually show that it's about 46% heritable.
Is that right?
Yeah, but that's like most personality traits. It's not really that different from any other personality traits, right? So we don't come into this life with like a blank slate. There's some things we pick up in our genes from our parents and that. And And so, yes. So if you notice it in your child, I mean, that tendency is likely there. And I think, the key thing there is, first of all, recognizing if what the emotional hurdles are. Like, is it about self-doubt or self-evaluation, negative self-evaluations? Like where is that those negative emotions about tasks coming from that they may be worried about, or just making them procrastinate. And second, I think, is just even at an early on now at this stage, getting them into some sort of practice with self-compassion, or just, not beating themselves up about the procrastination. That's really important. And just accepting, like, hey, I have a tendency to procrastinate. That's not giving up, and that's not saying, oh, this is how I am. That's recognizing that there's something there that might stand in the way of reaching your goals and your dreams, and starting to take, some action towards managing it, and particularly the negative emotions that might be driving it. So, learn to be more self-compassionate, for example.
And how do we do that? Things like gratitude practice, I'm sure, must help. Mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, those are sort of basic background. I think the self-compassion really comes into play when you are struggling with a task. So, because self-compassion it's a response to, suffering, to difficulty, and to challenge. So if you've got a task and you're struggling with it, and you're on the verge of procrastinating it, it's at that point that you want to exercise self-compassion, right? Because that's that point we start getting on, down on ourselves for the fact that we're struggling. And that's where the perfectionism come in, right? If I'm a perfectionist, I shouldn't be struggling. I should be just doing it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Instead of going, part of learning anything new means struggling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we get over that need to, like, or procrastinating? How do we know that our best is good enough? Do you have, any good tips to offer us for that?
Yeah, I always go back to the self-compassion, because I think it's about.
But how do we develop the self-compassion?
Because embedded within the self-compassion, there's that common humanity, which is accepting that to be human is to be imperfect.
Yeah.
But it's accepting imperfection as a normal thing.
Right.
And I think it's around, to start normalizing that those imperfections. And this is where that component of self-compassion, I think, is really powerful, because in recognizing this common humanity, you're not, the first person to procrastinate or be struggling with this task, and nor will you be the last. You can also reach out to other people. So when we hear about other people's experiences with the same sort of things that we're struggling with, or maybe even procrastinating on, it's not like you form a club to go, yeah, procrastination's club, it's all okay. It's more about sort of an entry point for recognizing that, hey, there's nothing really unique or special about this thing that you're beating yourself up about. It's actually really, really kind of normal.
So community can be a big help.
It can be, yeah. Because it takes away the shame. Because
that must be a big thing too.
It is, yeah. Because think about it. So we have this hyper productivity society right now, right? You have so many things out there about how to be more productive, how to get things done, all this sort of thing, and, procrastination's, become really popular as a topic because people want to combat it so they can be more productive, which is not necessarily the way I would kind of go with why it's important to address procrastination. I look at it more from the mental health and well-being perspective. But anyways, so if you've got this society that's all focused on hyper productivity, part of that then means that that's what we call societal norm, right? So if you're a productive member of society, if you get things done, you contribute to society. We're social beings, right? So you're contributing, you can be depended on when somebody needs you. So we have all these sort of positive qualities associated with being productive. When we procrastinate, we're actually transgressing that social norm, right? We're now going against what society says is good, because we're not being productive. We're not getting our stuff done.
Right.
And nobody else may know it, right? But we all internalize those norms. And when the social emotions that people feel when they've transgressed a social norm, or two of them, is guilt, means bad behavior, I've done something bad, and shame.
Yeah.
It means I'm a bad person.
I'm such an idiot. I'm so lazy. The self-talk, gets out of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so that that then makes you want to hide it.
Yeah.
It makes you feel worse because now you've got no one to talk to about as well. And so, it perpetuates those negative feelings and that stress. Whereas if you bring it out in the open, now all of a sudden it can lift some of that shame. You might still feel guilty, and that's okay to feel guilty about it. Guilt can actually be a motivator if it's in the right dose and it doesn't turn into shame. It's the shame that's deadly in those instances, that's what's going to keep you from getting help or assistance or managing those emotions that you can get things done you want to get done. And like you said, having community and reaching out, it reduces the shame around procrastination, and it gives you, and it can be motivating because other people can say, yeah, I've gone through the same thing and I struggle with it. You can then that's that common humanity. So that's actually a pathway into self-compassion.
Yeah, I was talking about this just a couple of days ago, the power of the Me Too's,
Yeah.
2 words that are so comforting to hear is me too.
Exactly.
To know that you're not alone, you're not unique, and that you're not alone in your struggles is so takes such a weight off with various things. But we don't know, we can't get a me too unless we share our own vulnerability with somebody else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I assume with we can model this to our kids and hopefully show them that authenticity is the way to go, and not try not to make everything so perfect all the time. I mean, I don't think I could be perfect if I wanted to.
What is perfect? What is perfect anyways?
At this point, I have not knocked myself out of the broadcast, so that's a plus. I just want to say, show again, the name of her amazing Audible is Do It Now, Overcoming Procrastination. You guys definitely want to get this. Is Dr. Fuschia Sirois from the University of Sheffield. So self-compassion is a great strategy. What are some other things that have helped people that you have worked with to overcome these tendencies that we have?
So I think, one of the reasons I like self-compassion is it helps dial down those negative feelings, right? That are making you want to run in the opposite direction from a task, right?
Yeah.
But another strategy is actually to dial up the positive feelings. And that's another part of emotion regulation that's really important. And, there was some research that was done that just giving people training in emotion regulation skills, and some of that included mindfulness, actually decreased levels of procrastination. But one of the things, I think that it's a simple thing to do, and one of my PhD students, she just finished up and defended her PhD like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Minor corrections, yeah. So she's really happy, and it was in her second language too, because she was Chinese. I don't know how she.
Wow.
I couldn't imagine defending PhD in a second language. So
yeah.
But anyways, she had a really great study. She was really interested in how positive emotions could be used to help reduce procrastination. So when she came to me with her PhD idea, this was sort of the crux of it. And so she looked at a couple of things in different studies. She looked at this idea that we have mixed emotions sometimes. We have both positive and negative feelings about tasks that we procrastinate on, and how do you manage that? But in her final study, she wanted to test this idea that if you can make a task that you're at risk for procrastinating on more meaningful, that might reduce procrastination. So she set up an experiment, and she got people into the study who were all said that this is a task that they're on the verge of procrastinating. And one group just kind of wrote about the goal that they had, that they were at risk for procrastinating, no special instructions. Another one, she told them to say, think about something positive about that task you're working on. And then, so that was sort of the positive emotion, group. And then the final group, she asked them and gave them very specific instructions about trying, think about something meaningful. Why is this task meaningful for you? So she had them finish like sentences like, completing this task is meaningful for me because, right? Or I'll be able to experience greater personal growth from completing this task because, so that they, it wasn't just a general
Sounds like my gratitude journal.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So picking out So they would identify what it is about the task that was meaningful rather than just repeating, oh, this task is meaningful. So they personalized it that way. And so then she followed up with them. I think it was like, 24, 36, well, yeah, it was probably 36, 48 hours later. And she had them complete a grid where they broke their day down into chunks of time and reported how much time they were spending procrastinating on that task they were working. And we've used this before, and it gives you a rough idea of when people are procrastinating, because it's actually very hard to track, live kind of thing. And what she found was that the people who didn't get any instructions, they procrastinated for a lot of minutes. They just, it was, it was hours. But those who had the positive, who looked at for the positive emotions in the task, they procrastinated less. But the group that procrastinated the least in terms of minutes was the group that had the instructions to try and find something meaningful about that task that they were at risk for procrastinating.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Is it helpful to set smaller, more achievable goals along the way than one big long goal?
Yeah, that's a very common strategy. And you'll hear that a lot. And people say, oh, well, because when you work on those small bits, you get a feeling of success.
Yeah,
that can then, can fuel your motivation. It does that, but it does something else first. And this is not really mentioned a lot. And I, trying to bring that up on people's radars too, because one of the first things that happens when you have a big task that's overwhelming, what's your reaction to that big task, right? It's it's stressful.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the definition of stress. So if we encounter something that we feel is overwhelming, that exceeds and taxes our resources and perhaps puts our well-being at risk, that is the definition of stress. Right. And that's when we will psychologically experience stress. So something that's overwhelming is going to make you feel anxious or stressed. When you break it down into small pieces and you look at it, you no longer feel stressed. So what you've just done is you down regulated or dialed down those negative, stressful feelings from an overwhelming task. And that's before you even start working on it. Once you start working on it, then you get the added benefit of, that feeling of confidence and success that you've actually, done something.
Right. In my group Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, in the morning, we set daily intentions, we call it, versus goals. And that's to allow for, life to happen or illnesses to happen. And we set intentions. I know maybe semantics, intentions versus goals, but with intentions, it kind of, I call it like a loose roadmap written in pencil to give us something to shoot for during the day, but without that stress of having at the end of the day saying, oh, I wasn't able to do that because of my condition. And I've heard from many people, they find that, helpful to think of it that way versus like, I'm going to clean the kitchen and the bathrooms and, but breaking it into smaller pieces, more palatable pieces seems to, I like doing check marks. I'd rather do a lot of check marks. I mean, there's something great to aim for the stars, shoot big and all that. And the rewards are wonderful, but maybe the stress leading up to it may not be worth it.
Well, that's just it. Because if you feel stressed about the task, you're more likely to procrastinate on it, right? Yeah. Because that's, like we said, it's you'll do that as a way to regulate those emotions. Yeah. So if you can reframe your task into something that's more manageable or meaningful, right?
Right.
Then you're going to now not have that same level of negative feelings, or maybe none at all. And you may even start getting excited about doing it because you'll see the meaningfulness of it, or you'll see how, hey, this is actually really easy. I can get this done in no time.
Yeah. Yeah. Robin says, holy cow, if that heart disease correlation doesn't motivate, I don't know what will. Thank you, Self-Compassion. Completely unrelated, but I was on your Twitter page before we went live. And if you guys want to follow her on Twitter, here's her Twitter handle. You had a study out, which I hadn't read before, about loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
And visits to see your doctor, loneliness. Do you want to talk about that for the couple minutes we have left? Oh,
yeah, sure.
Over. All right. Well, let's talk about it briefly, and then we'll
very briefly. I can always come back and talk about loneliness now.
I was fascinated by it.
Yeah, it was a review that we did. We looked at all the studies that have looked at whether people who feel lonely go to their doctors more often. And a couple of the premises for this is that a lot of the research literature has shown that loneliness is actually really bad for your health. The risk associated with loneliness is comparable to that for smoking, apparently, according to one other study. So we figured, well, if there's health issues, maybe they're going to the doctor more. But then there was other research suggesting, and this is more coming out from the doctor's perspective, where they felt a lot of the patients they were seeing didn't have real pressing health issues, but they were coming because they were lonely and they wanted to talk to somebody. So we analyzed all that research, and that's what we found, is that people who are lonely go make more visits to their doctors. We're not really sure why. We're still investigating, but I think it is partly they've got worse health, but also
they're lonely.
They're lonely, and they don't have a social network to talk to. So the doctor is the way to do it. And the link that we found was stronger for women.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, men don't like to go to the doctor anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, women are greater, use more healthcare than men, anyways, right? So that could be part of that. But also, women probably don't cope as well when they don't have social connections. Men can kind of, not to be stereotypical here, but in terms of how we're socialized, right? Men can kind of say it's okay to kind of do it on my own, where it feels not quite as right for women to do that, because we're sort of more enculturated to be more social.
Yeah. Well, if you're lonely, join Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain on Facebook. Will you come back and talk to us about loneliness the next time?
Yeah,
I could talk to you for 20 hours, and your information is so fantastic. I can't believe the hour's over already. Thank you so much for being here again.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for everybody. I'm sorry if I wasn't able to get to your comments, but thank you for being here. And for those of you still left to watch all the information that we talked about. And real quick before we leave, Dr. Sirois, she's doing a new study. She's looking for people with chronic fatigue syndrome to study. You want to say what the study is real quickly, and then we'll put a link to this
So it's one of my students, my doctoral student. She's a clinical student, and she's really interested in how personality plays a role in adjustment and coping in chronic fatigue syndrome. So she's got a study running right now that she's having a bit of trouble finding people to participate. So it'd be great if anybody was interested in participating or knew somebody they could pass it along to. And I'll pass the link on to Lauren, and she'll post it.
Yeah, please contact me, or, I'll put the information up as soon as I have it. If you or anybody you know with chronic fatigue want to help them out, that would be fantastic. So Dr. Fuschia Sirois, thank you so much for being here. Have a very happy Thanksgiving in the UK. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you for being here at this special time, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace and love, gang. Take care.
Thanks, Lauren. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.